How you doing, folks? Welcome back to the channel. So in our news roundup video from FSExpo the other day, you might have noticed I didn't mention anything to do with Flight Sim 24, and that's because I felt there's so much going on, it deserved its own video. So, as many of you know, Asobo took to the stage at FSExpo and gave us a load of juicy new details from Flight Sim 2024. It was a wide-ranging and quite long presentation, so I figured I'd give you my perspective of what I'm looking forward to in Flight Sim 24 as someone who flies mostly jetliners. So let's jump in. Now, first things first, they mentioned actually that Flight Sim 2020 will get near monthly updates until 2028, which is really good news for those of you that want to stick around on Flight Sim 2020. But for those of us wanting to jump onto the latest version of the sim, there is a whole lot to talk about. The first one being how the terrain will be generated in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So in the current version, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, the ground textures would be created from satellite and aerial images, and that's kind of what gives Microsoft Flight Simulator that kind of flattish look that, you know, a lot of you will be familiar with. In Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, however, they're moving to a system whereby they capture 3D images of the terrain, which they can then overlay onto a 3D mesh. Then, Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud computing platform, will look at the satellite imagery and then analyze it to see where best to render trees, rocks, grass, etc. over the terrain. Really, really clever stuff. Now, it was unclear to me from the presentation whether this new way of rendering the terrain is going to be maybe exclusive to like points of interest, you know, kind of areas that they want to make look really good, or whether this is going to be like a global thing. So if you know, if you've got any insight on what's going on there, let us know in the comments. Share the information with the community. Would be really glad to hear from you. Looking at the differences between Flight Sim 2020 and the way the rendering takes place in 2024, the differences are profound. Check out the differences. So here we have Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, which doesn't look bad in all fairness, and then we switch to 2024. Now, if you switch back to 2020, which, you know, did look pretty good, all of a sudden it looks a bit eh. Now, in a previous video, we spoke about how we thought the Airbus A330 we saw in the previous trailer was made by AnyBuilds due to the appearance of the EFB. Asobo did confirm that AnyBuilds are indeed making the Airbus A330 for Microsoft Flight Sim 24, and they also said that we're getting the A330-200 and the A330-300, and we will be getting different engine options. So we'll have the General Electric engine and the Rolls-Royce engine. So really nice setup there on the A330 from AnyBuilds, which is going to come as default with the sim. So that's really awesome. And to what I thought got the biggest cheer is first person mode. It's here. Now, I'm not about to start turning into a wildlife photographer during our live streams, but it sure would be nice to be able to walk around the plane properly versus mucking around with a camera view. And also walking around the plane to do walk-arounds is something I'm really looking forward to. So this was a really great announcement from Asobo. And they also made reference to an update to their lighting engine. And the biggest standout for me was how ray tracing can be used inside the cockpit for shadows, getting rid of those kind of horrible fuzzy shadows that we've become so used to with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. This new lighting engine won't just improve shadows, it will also improve color accuracy. They pointed out that sometimes in Flight Sim 2020, like the underbelly of a plane might appear a little bit on the green side due to how the indirect lighting isn't quite being handled 100% as they would like. But they made a point of saying that this has now been updated for Flight Sim 24, which will hopefully give a much more realistic look to the plane and obviously the overall scene. This lighting engine will also pay dividends when it comes to the clouds, in particular cirrus clouds. The way the clouds are lit, depending on how high they are, will give a much more realistic appearance. And seasons will also be integrated into the sim. Airports are going to see some big improvements too, including having the ability to have 3D moving passengers walking around, which is super nice. Lots of ground vehicles and clutter. That, you know, they're really trying to capture that busy vibe you get from an airport. The scene from JFK that we saw from the latest trailer kind of shows what's possible with the latest SDK. So it would be awesome to see how third-party airport developers can make use of the newest version of the SDK in 2024. So it would be interesting to see what we see from third parties. JFK will be seeing a nice upgrade from the folks over at Gaia. Ground markings are also said to be dramatically improved, which is nice. So hopefully we'll get a bit more information on this over time. And they also started talking about their partners, which are third-party developers that are making content for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. First up, Working Title came out to announce they're working on a route planner, which will live within the sim, and that'll include fuel, payload, ETOPS planning, obviously as well as the route planning. Now, it will remain to be seen if this replaces SimBrief for me, but I certainly look forward to checking it out. I totally wasn't expecting that. Also, we're going to get replay functionality coming directly into the sim. Now, this is coming from Flight Control Replay, which was a payware replay app, and that's now being directly integrated within Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. So I love how so many things that we used to rely on as plugins are now going to be standard within the sim. It's super, super cool. Then, as a final one more thing, they announced that Flight Sim 2024 will come as standard with a Boeing 737 MAX. Asobo say this is their most complex plane yet. That, it'll remain to be seen how complex it ends up being when you compare and contrast it to the like of, PMDG and their Boeings. Even if it doesn't stack up to the PMDG, and honestly, I don't expect it to, it could still be really good for the sim and new simmers. I think some of the study level planes, they're really expensive and they can just be a bit much for those getting into the hobby. I tell some people sometimes that, I bought a Boeing 737 for my flight sim and they ask me how much it cost and, whatever it was, $69.99 in US dollars. And they look at me like they've seen a ghost. They can't believe that you would pay for a game that's, expensive to begin with, and then pay that much for a plane, a single plane to go into it. And you have to say, no. It's study level, it's got all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And you can just see them glaze over. So I do think it's important that more entry-level planes are available. So it's nice to see the 737, especially the MAX, being included in this way. Now, this was a 1.5 hour presentation, so it was packed with loads of other details. I'll leave a link in the description to the full video and I'd encourage you to go and watch it. But for me, as someone that flies the airliners more or less exclusively, these are the bits that kind of stood out to me the most. But let me know in the comments if you think I missed anything or if anything particularly caught your eye. And get sub to the channel as you don't want to miss any upcoming content. Until next time, take the very best care of yourselves. And as always, happy flying.